From a vast land of scattered tribesmen, a great princedom was born. In our last episode, the proud tribes of the eastern Slavs from Ladoga to Kiev were unified under the Norse chieftain Rurik and his brother-in-law Oleg. In this episode, we will continue where we left off, telling the story of war, trade, politics and adventure that defined the history of the early Kievan Rus. Today's video is sponsored by Babbel, the #1 language learning app in the world. For a historical channel, knowing the language of the sources used in the videos is extremely helpful, and as we've worked on this series on Russian history, we decided that we needed a refresher to be able to read the works of the Russian authors. As it is impossible to work with a tutor right now, we decided to try Babbel, and that was a great experience. Я учу русский язык. Unlike other language learning apps, Babbel is ad-free and it prepares you for real life. With Babbel, you can count on learning from people who have actual experience teaching languages. Studies have shown that just 15 hours of learning with Babbel is an equivalent of a semester in college. Babbel has well-structured courses teaching 13 languages, and they're great if you want to learn a new language or are looking for self-improvement. So what are you waiting for? Support us and click the link in the description below right now to get 50% off Babbel for 6 months for a limited time only. The early Kievan Rus was in function a tributary empire, comprised of internally autonomous tribes and towns, all under the suzerainty of the Grand Prince of the Rurikid dynasty, who was based in the prosperous trading city of Kiev. Each tribe within was ruled independently, paying a tribute to Kiev, and joined their armies to the Grand Prince in times of war. The tribes received protection from the Grand Prince's Družina, an elite retinue of warriors who kept order across the realm. Culturally, the early Kievan state was an ethnic and linguistic smorgasbord. The Rurikid princes and their Družina were most likely predominantly Scandinavian, although a skilled warrior from any origin could join the prince's retinue. The majority of peoples in Rus lands were the Eastern Slavs, who spoke the Old East Slavic language, from which modern Russian, Ukrainian and Belarusian stem. Other peoples in the Kievan Rus included the Finno-Ugric and Baltic-speaking tribes in the north, and likely some Turkic peoples from former Khazaria. Religion across the realm was a diverse spectrum. The pagan Slavs continued to worship Perun and Volos in their oaken groves, while the Scandinavian elites retained aspects of their own pantheons of Thor, Odin and Loki. One of the most famous living accounts of Norse religious rites comes from the Arab traveller Ibn Fadlan, whose journey up the Volga River in 922 brought him into an encounter with a boisterous tribe of Varangian Norsemen. Fadlan watched in fascination and horror as the body of a great Viking chieftain was laid in his longship alongside a slave girl who had volunteered to be ritually sacrificed. The boat and all the precious personal belongings it carried were thus set alight in a great bonfire, and the souls within committed to Valhalla. This funerary practice was probably unique to the Kievan Vikings and deviated from the Scandinavian rites. However, it is a testament that some form of Norse paganism thrived among the warrior caste of the Kievan realm. The Rurikid princes remained fiercely warlike throughout most of their early history, seeking to become rich through plunder and tribute. To them, the ultimate prize would always be the most splendorous land on the far end of the Black Sea. To that end, they turned the dragonhead prows of their longboats towards Constantinople, the place they simply called the Great City, Miklagard. Norse raiders had failed to take Constantinople in 860, but now they were unified under the Rurikids, they could muster a larger and more organized invasion force. The first Rurikid expedition against the Great City is recorded in Nestor's primary chronicle. It occurred in 907 AD, when the first Grand Prince of Kiev, Oleg, led a fleet of 2,000 boats, ferrying Norse, Slavic, Finnic and Baltic warriors down the Black Sea and into the Bosphorus Strait. Upon seeing their arrival, Emperor Leo VI closed the harbour of Constantinople and shut the gates. Unable to breach the Theodosian walls, Oleg had his men beach their ships and disembark on the Gallatin side of the Golden Horn, ordering his warriors to sack the suburbs and villages on the peripheries of the imperial city. The Rus quickly quashed any resistance, killing many Greeks, looting and burning churches in the process. This eventually brought the Romans to submission and forced them to pay a hefty tribute. Additionally, the Rus had won trading concessions with the Roman Emperor, which boded well for the long-term economic prosperity of the Kievan realm. It is notable that the Rus ambassadors, who bore Scandinavian names such as Farolf, Hrolaf and Stemir, swore to uphold this agreement by swearing upon the Slavic gods, which suggests that Slavic and Norse customs had already begun to blend. Oleg died in 912, succeeded by Igor, the son of Rurik himself. The young prince was met with adversity at the very beginning of his reign. Troublesome Slavic Drevlians refused to pay him tribute. Igor, however, possessed the iron will of his Rurikid bloodline and was able to crush them in battle, imposing a harsher annual tribute upon them. Having proven himself, Igor kept the peace in his realm for a time. Like his predecessors before him, he began to dream about the Byzantines' wealth. In 941, the Kievan prince mustered a small fleet of Norsemen, Slavic warriors and Turkic Pecheneg mercenaries, sailing up the Dnieper River with the aim of pillaging Byzantine lands. This time, however, the Greeks were ready. Warned by the Danubian Bulgars that Igor was coming, they dispatched a fleet to halt their advance. They utterly destroyed the Norse longboats using their secret weapon, Greek fire. Igor managed to escape the inferno, landing on the northern coast of Anatolia, where he and the remnants of his army began pillaging the hinterlands until they were driven back northwards by the famed Roman generals Bardas Phocas and John Kourkouas. Igor returned home and began mustering a far larger army than before, made up of the combined tribes of the Rus, and by 944 was ready to attack the imperial city. Hearing of the imminent arrival of this armada, Emperor Romanos I capitulated, giving up yet more precious gifts in tribute, while offering more concessions to Rus merchants. It should be noted that both Rus-Byzantine treaties are full of very specific trading stipulations, tariffs and customs laws. This emphasizes that the Rus princes were also merchants at heart. However, the princes Dragina had long been dissatisfied with their pay and beseeched Igor to take more wealth from his subjects, saying, "Come with us, prince, to collect tribute, and you will gain and so will we." Igor agreed, and to that end rode to the land of his least favourite subjects, the ever-troublesome Drevlians. The Grand Prince had collected tribute from the Drevlians once that year already, and his return for more made evident that the Drevlians had had enough of Rurikid tyranny. They poured out of their city, killed the prince's retinue, and took him captive. Igor was then executed in a gruesome fashion. The Kievan prince's unceremonious death would lead to the rise of his widow, Princess Olga. Despite being around 25 years old, Olga had a Varangian spirit, was iron-willed and was cunning as a fox. Her revenge, recorded in the primary chronicle, has since become the stuff of legend. The Drevlians now had their own designs on the Kievan throne, emboldened by their murder of the Grand Prince. They sent envoys to Kiev with a proposal to Olga. "We slew your husband because he plundered us like a wolf. Our princes are good and have preserved the land of the Drevlians. So we come to you, requesting you to marry our prince, Mal." The princess knew that marrying the Drevlian prince wasn't an option, firstly because he would surely murder her infant son Sviatoslav, and secondly because vengeance burned in her heart. Nevertheless, playing the role of the timid maiden, she feigned eagerness to accept the offer. The next day, she had the Drevlian emissaries carried to her palace in their boat under the guise of honouring them, only to have the boat thrown into a ditch and the emissaries buried alive. Olga followed up this ruthless deception with another. Sending a messenger to the Drevlians, she claimed she would happily marry their Prince Mal, if only they would send her an honour guard of their best soldiers so she could be escorted in a manner befitting a princess. A contingent of elite warriors were sent to Kiev, and once more, Olga welcomed them with feigned hospitality. allowing them the honor of using her own bathhouse. When the honor guard entered the sauna to wash, Olga had the doors barred and the building set aflame. Olga then travelled to Drevlian lands with a small retinue of loyal warriors. Upon arrival, she managed to convince the Drevlians that their emissaries and honor guard were on their way and were not in fact dead. A great feast was held in her honor. As the sun set and the crowd grew drunk with mead, Olga gave her cue and her warriors massacred over 5,000 Drevlians. Soon, Olga returned with a massive army to finish the job. Town after town in Drevlian lands fell until she reached their capital in Koristan. Knowing that cunning, not brute strength, was the key into the city, Olga offered an olive branch of mercy. At this time you have neither honey nor furs, so I have a small request to make. Give me 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household. I do not wish to lay a heavy tribute on you, as my husband did. The people of Koristan were overjoyed and eagerly fulfilled the princess's will. Unfortunately for them, the fires of Olga's vengeance had not dimmed. She had her soldiers attach to each bird a small piece of sulfur wrapped in cloth and tied to a fuse. When night fell, she ordered the fuses to be lit and the birds to be set free. Flying back over Koristan with their tail feathers alight, the sparrows and pigeons set the entire town aflame. Panicked and broken, the people of Koristan fled their city, only to be captured beyond the walls by Olga's soldiers, slaughtered or enslaved. Princess Olga proved to be more than just a mass murderer. For many years after her annihilation of the Drevlians, she proved to be an effective, well-respected head of state, ruling the Kievan Rus as regent on behalf of her young son Sviatoslav. She proactively built settlements in the northern regions of her realm, while ending the ever-hated tribute system, replacing it with a better regulated system of taxation. An adept diplomat, she cultivated good relations with Kiev's trading partners, the most important of all being Eastern Rome. In the year 957, she set off for Constantinople on a diplomatic mission to treat with Emperor Constantine VII. There, she accepted the Christian Orthodox faith and was baptized. We don't know what Olga's motivation was, but it probably was done for political and economic gain. She made a piecemeal attempt to encourage Christianity in her realm, having churches built throughout it, but her subjects largely clung to their polytheistic faiths. Whatever gains Christianity made were further rolled back in 964, when Olga's regency ended and the young firebrand Prince Sviatoslav took the Kievan throne. In mannerism and dress, Sviatoslav resembled more his Slavic and Turkic subjects than his Scandinavian ancestors, the legacy of 100 years of Norse assimilation into the culture of their subjects. By all accounts, Sviatoslav's violent childhood had made him cold and ruthless. He rejected his mother's faith, believing that converting to Christianity would lose him the respect of the pagan warriors he rode with, and remained devout to the Slavic pantheon. Sviatoslav's reign would be defined by constant, unending conquests. While his mother continued to run the realm's bureaucratic matters, the young prince spent his days riding with his royal družina, raiding and pillaging neighboring nations. Sviatoslav and his warriors traveled without tents, wagons or kettles. They lived rough off the land, taking what they needed to survive by right of pillage or by hunting wild game. In popular legend, he was compared to a snow leopard, for he moved lightly and struck quickly. The young prince's first target of major conquest was the land of the Jewish Turkic lords. He and his warriors fanned out over the Eurasian steppe, town by town, tribe by tribe, forcing the peoples of Khazaria to submit themselves to the rule of the Rus or be annihilated. Sviatoslav employed Turkic mercenaries from other tribes, using their mastery of mounted combat to counter the equally skilled Khazar horse archers. In 965, Rus warriors stormed and annihilated the incredibly prosperous trading cities of Sarkal and Kerch. This was functionally the end of the Khazars, crippled beyond repair, and their empire would never recover. The final death blow came in 969, when their capital at Atil was destroyed. A year prior to this, Eastern Roman envoys had approached the Rus prince with an offer. In return for a hefty tribute of 15,000 pounds of gold, Sviatoslav was asked to participate in a joint invasion of the enemy of the Romans, the mighty Danubian Bulgars. Sensing an opportunity for wealth, war and glory, Sviatoslav eagerly accepted the Roman tribute and mustered a 60,000-strong army of Norsemen, Slavs and Pecheneg mercenaries. Like his ancestors, he struck like a lightning bolt from heaven, annihilating the armies of Bulgar Khan Boris II and quickly conquering the entirety of northern Bulgaria. Emperor John Tzimiskes now realized he'd made a deal with the devil. Sviatoslav was becoming far too powerful, and his marauding army would likely not stop in Bulgaria, but could pillage its way to the very gates of Constantinople itself. Knowing that Kiev was largely undefended, the Romans bribed the Pechenegs to betray Sviatoslav and lay siege to the city. The Pechenegs proved unscrupulous in the face of Roman gold, and promptly thundered into the Kievan heartland, laying siege to the Rurikid capital. Now an elderly woman, Olga was nonetheless able to lead her men and hold out against the Turkic horde until Sviatoslav could return with his army, driving the Pechenegs back to their steppe homeland. Olga died of illness soon after the siege, and was buried quietly on consecrated ground as Christian tradition demanded. In death, she was canonized as Saint Olga, with the epithet equal to the apostles. To this day, she is revered by the Orthodox Church. Meanwhile, the Romans, not content with poking the bear only once, demanded that all territory won by the Rus in Bulgaria had to be surrendered to the emperor in Constantinople, as Sviatoslav had invaded Bulgaria on their behalf. Sviatoslav refused and launched an invasion of Byzantium with a massive army of Norsemen, Slavs, Magyars, and contingents of loyal Pechenegs and Bulgars. The Rus coalition smashed against the gates of Adrianople, but were defeated by a Roman counteroffensive at the Battle of Arcadiopolis in 970. The Rurikid prince was forced to retreat to Dorostelon, where he held out against the Romans for 65 days, but cut off and surrounded, was eventually forced to make peace with them, relinquishing his conquests. Fearing that the truce with Sviatoslav would not endure, the Byzantine emperor induced the Pecheneg Khan Kurya to kill the Rus prince before he reached Kiev. Sure enough, while attempting to cross the cataphracts on the Isle of Kotitsa, he and his retinue were set upon by a hail of Turkic arrows. Sviatoslav was killed in the ambush, and according to legend, his skull was turned into a drinking vessel for the Pecheneg Khan. After Olga's passing, Sviatoslav had left the civil governance of the Kievan Rus to his two sons, Yaropolk and Oleg. With his death, civil strife now threatened to tear the realm apart, as the two sons pointed their blades at one another, each seeking to ascend as the new Grand Prince. It is on this cliffhanger that we will end this episode. Our story will continue soon, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also support us by buying our merchandise via the link in the description. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.